Greetings from the Dark Continent, Conscious Caracal here, Adams Van Sail, here to shine a light specifically tonight on something going on in South Africa. But I think tonight's topic is also going to have some insights for if you are living abroad or specifically living in a country where there's also a firearms debate or a gun control debate or whatever you want to call it. I think looking at South Africa as a case study is going to give you a lot of insight specifically to the other side of the spectrum when it comes to actually having very strict gun control and very strict firearm legislation and what the effect of that has been. Tonight, joining me for this very interesting conversation and topic is Gideon Joubert. You will recognize him from previous episodes. It's not the first time that he's appeared on the channel. He's known under the username Paratus on social media, and he's one of the leading responsible firearm ownership and rights lobbyists in South Africa, and also an independent security consultant. So, welkom op die program, Gideon, and I'm looking forward to it.
Baie dankie, Ernst, and thank you for everyone else who's tuning in. And I've been looking forward to this chat, I think, ever since I got the invite. So it's going to be a good one, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I think it's a necessary one because I don't see a lot of people taking the angle that I want to take with tonight's conversation in regards to this topic. So the topic here, if you didn't see it in the title already, is this new quote-unquote wave or trend of mass shootings in South Africa. And there's something that I want to first direct your attention to before we start off, and that is the way that it is being framed by the media. So you're seeing something very specific here. It is being framed as another mass shooting in place name, or on this week's News 24 podcast, is strong gun control the answer? Something along those lines. It's not being framed as here's a criminality or here is a concerning manifestation of crime. It is being framed as almost, the implication is almost baked in that this is something new. It's on a new, more alarming level than ever before. Everywhere in the reporting, you see this baked in implication in the background that we've reached something unprecedented. That's the idea that I'm getting. Gideon, what's your perception been in this regard?
So I think first off, and very boringly, I mean, and I did research this and I couldn't find it. Because I'm fairly confident it doesn't exist, but we don't actually have an official definition or description of what constitutes a mass shooting in the South African lexicon, whether they're talking about the terminology used by law enforcement officials, whether it's the SAPS or the State Security Agency or anyone else in the NPA or criminal justice system. We don't have a definition of a mass shooting. What we do have, though, is probably the sixth highest homicide rate in the world at this stage. And if you look at countries with populations above 10 million people in total, we're sitting with between second and fourth place of the most homicides in the world. So we have a very high murder rate. It has been increasing every single year since 2011. So we've had more than a decade of increases on it. And in the first quarter this year, compared to the first quarter in 2021, that murder rate has actually increased by 22%. Equally, when we look at conviction rates, only about 15% of all murderers are convicted of murder. Rapists are even fewer, that's 9%. And when we're talking trio crimes, that's hijackings, residential robberies, and business robberies. Robbery inferring there's somebody with a weapon threatening you with assault, or actually assaulting you in order to get your property. It's not theft. Trio crime conviction rates are at like 3%, less than 3%. So what we have in SA is we have a very violent society, high levels of violent crime, very low conviction rates, and of the total number of murders we have, which is around about 22,000 every year, which is more for a country of 60 million people than are murdered in the United States, with 300 plus million people in it. About 35% of all our murders are committed by use of firearms. The overwhelming majority is committed by use of sharp object, knives, screwdrivers, broken bottles, that sort of stuff. So that's just to bring the audience give them a bit of perspective of the crime situation. When you talk mass shootings, we assume there's a certain number of people that are shot at a specific location. These tavern shootings, Ernst, they are quite interesting in the fact that violence in places where people drink alcohol is not particularly common as a venue for murder in SA, which actually surprised me when I looked at the statistics, but it's not uncommon either. So there's definitely, in my mind, I think there's a bit of an agenda being driven here with how it's being approached, especially when we start talking, and I think we will get to that in a minute, the potential motive behind this stuff.
Yeah, and I just want to give some quick context here before we continue. What Gideon is referencing there is in July, 15 people were massacred at a tavern in Soweto, South Africa, and this is only one of the big high profile cases of this. There have been other cases now recently where it's also again hit the headlines of 5 people, 7 people killed in what's being framed as a mass shooting. But before we continue, so just to be sure that the audience got that correctly, there isn't in the South African context a real definition for a mass shooting. But then what is the media using as their own definition? When they use this term, are they just kind of every journalist can decide what is a mass shooting? What's going on?
So I think they're copy and pasting straight out of the US definition of it. And to be honest, the American definition on this isn't particularly concrete either. Some definitions of a mass shooting is there needs to be 4 or more dead people. Other definitions of a mass shooting is it's 6 or more people that have been shot. Other definitions are there needs to be X amount of people in a location where shots are being fired into. So it's a very it's a very fluid definition, which is also why serious people don't use it. And I'm not trying to be facetious. If you talk to people who are actual security consultants, or they are in law enforcement, or they are in response officers or something similar in the US, they refer to these situations exclusively as an active shooter situation, where there is an individual or several individuals that are walking around a location shooting at people. And whether or not they're actually hitting them is irrelevant, because that's the official name of that situation, is you have an active shooter incident. Mass shooting is almost like assault weapon. It's a made-up term that is being used for sort of political or media reasons. In South Africa, and this is, I kind of made a tongue-in-cheek comment a few months ago, where I said after the Uvalde school shooting in Texas, that South Africa has several mass shootings every day, because it is very common in the way that our violence propagates itself. If you're looking at taxi violence, there's almost always several people shot when there is an incident involving it. When you're looking at cash and transit heist, you'll almost always have multiple people shot and injured when shots are exchanged or fired, either at the guards or at members of the public. When you're looking at gang violence, it's almost always a case of several people being shot at or shot and injured, if not killed. So most cases where criminals are engaging in protracted firing of shots, either at their intended victims or at their rivals or at whomever else, you do have a situation where there is a volume of people being shot. So that's also why I'm of the opinion that these definitions aren't helpful. If we look at the tavern shooting incidences themselves, the one I think that was in Soweto, there was a Metro Police. Hello, Dagbreker. There's a Metro Police officer involved in that, if I'm getting my incidents right. Then there was the other one that was the real sort of mass casualty incident, where I think there were 16 people dead or something similar. That the last I checked on that, they were blaming that on Zama Zamas from Lesotho. The reasons.
So just before we continue, sorry, Gideon, can you just for our international audience tell them what a Zama Zama is? I don't think there's anything in that title or concept that gives them any type of hint what that might be.
Actually, yes. My apologies for just forging ahead with these things. It is quite jargon heavy tonight. So if I say something that you guys don't know what it is, please don't feel shy, let me know. A Zama Zama is what we call in South Africa an illegal miner. And what an illegal miner is, it's somebody that is either going down a disused mine shaft, or in some cases a presently sort of not non-operational but not completely mothballed mine shaft, and at their own risk, and it's quite high risk, extracting mineral ore or sifting through it in the mine dumps in order to get their hands on precious metal, whether it's gold or iron ore or something. Mostly in these cases gold, because that's on the gold mines on the Rand, which they will then somehow probably through very well established organized crime networks actually sell the stuff. And it's such a lucrative trade that you actually have whole armies of these guys operating with near impunity in South Africa. And to explain just to what degree that is, there was an article in the Daily Maverick about a month and a half ago about an armed, I'm going to call them an armed force of about 150 Zama Zamas that engaged the security team of a mine in a protracted multi-hour long gunfight with full auto weapons. Now,
yeah, I was just gonna say I wasn't assuming that it's just a bunch of handguns being used here.
No, you're talking about full auto AK type rifles, and we'll get to the definition of what an AK type is. R4 series rifles, a whole bunch of stuff. And I believe, and I never got confirmation of this, but the one report spoke of even a belt-fed machine gun being used, which I'd assume would be something like a Russian PKM. But you know what?
This is Africa.
This is Africa. It could even have been one of the SANDF's FN Mag machine guns. But the story here is, so you had a very well organized, highly armed force of these guys. Most of them are foreigners from either Lesotho or Zimbabwe and even Mozambique,
and I'm assuming illegal foreigners, illegal immigrants.
Yeah, they're definitely not here with a passport and a visa. I can promise you that much. So they engage the mine security team. Now, mining security teams, you get various tiers of them. You get like the standard guy with the baton, and he's just there to watch and have oversight. And he's not really armed. Then you get the actual armed mine guards, who are sort of another role. And then most mines these days have very well equipped, highly trained tactical teams that are either ex-law enforcement, ex-military. Some of them come from specialized units, and others, again, are just straight out civvies, but very highly trained. And they engage these guys in a full-blown shootout. And I believe the police just kind of stood off to one side and waited for things to kind of the dust to settle before intervening, because that was how violent this encounter was.
Yeah, the police probably heard the automatic rifles or the belt-fed machine gun.
So this is it, right? And these guys are almost all, I've seen numerous videos of Zama Zamas on social media. I get quite a few sent to me on a daily basis. And you know which ones come from Lesotho, because they're wearing the Basotho blankets almost always, which will bring us to the Krugersdorp incident that ties in with this. But these guys, and when I say AK type rifles, there's several. You get the AKM, which has a different receiver to the old AK-47. And then you get the Type 56, which is a Chinese copy of the AK-47. And it's like AK-47, AKM, halfway in between the two. But it's a very high quality, very reliable AK type rifle. So those are the three you typically see circulating in SA. They are either originate from struggle era arms caches, or they're getting smuggled in from Mozambique, or they're getting smuggled in from Zim. Or some of these things, as a piece of intelligence indicated a while back, that got looted from the Durban Harbour, also in the Daily Maverick, written by Heidi Swart, I think she was the author. It was a very good article. And I'm not usually somebody who says good things about the DM, but they've had some really good pieces on this stuff. An entire container of AKs that got looted during the Durban riots last year. There were also unconfirmed reports of containers of AKs being brought in from other African countries in the Middle East that just got offloaded in Richards Bay. So this country is being flooded with AK-type rifles, and a lot of them are ending up not in CIT gangs' hands, but also in the hands of Zama Zamas, who are on different factions or rivaling factions. They're deeply embedded in organized crime networks. They have their own feuds and rivalries, and this tavern shooting, by all intents and purposes, was kind of part of one of those rivalries sort of flaring up into outright violence.
Before we continue, I just want to say hello to one of the premier subscribers here on the Conscious Caracal YouTube channel, Quentin Ferreira, friend of the show. Also, Gideon, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Q.
I remember this man. I haven't seen him in ages, Quentin.
Yeah, well, he's tuning in all the way from Portugal, and it's nice to see you tuning in, Mr. Q. And then also, I see here everyone is very excited for tonight's topic. I saw there was a question. Cornelius asked your definition of a mass shooting at the beginning of the stream. We discussed that in full. So when it's done, you can just go back and go check what's going on there in regards to that question. I see here there was a question regarding AfriForum at Conscious Caracal. Brother, tell me a way to give some money to help you guys, please. I did donate to a legitimate recommended farm charity. If you're living abroad, easiest way you can support good cause is to go to Friends of AfriForum. Just Google Friends of AfriForum and you can make a donation to people in South Africa creating state-proof solutions. So there's your answer. But yeah, Gideon, that's quite disturbing stuff that you're describing there. But other than, well, basically illegal mining syndicates, gang violence, is there anything else that you haven't touched on that could also be causing many of these, let's not call it mass shootings, but rather high level of casualty events or shootings? I think that would be the best way to look at it.
So if we look at, what a lot of these high casualty events or incidents tend to be, is it kind of ties in with the extreme degree of violent criminality that's present at a fairly prolific degree in SA. And to simplify why that's the case, and I cannot boil it down more basic than this, is violence is cheap in South Africa. We don't, your odds of being caught as a murderer is about 19%. Your chances of then being convicted is about 75 to 76%. So only about 15% if you murder someone, for your chance of actually ending up in prison for committing that crime. Then if you're a rapist, you're about 9% chance, which is going to be lower because of the degree of which rape is underreported in SA. You can probably cut that rate by about 3 or 4. So you're about 2 to 3% chance of going to prison for rape in SA. True crime similar, and they're talking violent robberies and hijackings. So we have a society where actual meaningful consequences for crime doesn't exist. We have a very low rate of civilian sort of ownership of their own personal safety. And one of the ways we can gauge that is when we look at the rate of guns we own per 100 people is about 88th globally. People in Austria, Finland, Sweden, New Zealand, Italy and Greece and all sorts of these places, and even Canada, own more guns per 100 people than we do. And that infers that there's not a lot of people out there that actually carry these things defensively. So if you're a criminal and you're targeting someone in SA, your chances of targeting a defenseless victim is pretty high. So you're not going to pay the cost at the point of dispensing. And that encourages kind of a very brazen criminal element, because you don't have to operate carefully. You don't have to be particularly sparing pertaining the level of violence you use. There's a strong correlation between the level of skill that a criminal possesses and how violent they are. So the more skilled a criminal is, that the use of extreme violence tends to be much lower. The lower skilled a criminal is, they tend to just ramp up the violence right up there. Now, correlation, it doesn't equal causation, but it's an interesting observation. All of these things together, when you talk about corruption, the SAPs, how the police are actually at high ranks involved in organized crime themselves, the political involvement in organized crime, and everything that filters down further, the dysfunction of the criminal justice system as a whole, all of these things together give this violent crime breeding ground, of which high casualty shooting events is just one single section of the bigger problem. And you can't solve that without addressing quite literally the whole issue itself. There is some success, for example, in targeted approaches when you talk about gang violence and targeted approaches concerning wildlife poaching and illegal miners. But all in all, you're just busy chipping away at specific segments, and you need an overall proper crime reduction strategy, which is not rocket science, but there doesn't appear to be the political will to actually do something about it.
We have a question here from the chat from Cornelius, a very interesting question. He asks, would the conviction rates have been higher if we had a working DNA system?
Yes and no. So DNA is very much, as far as I'm aware, it's supporting evidence. If you still have bad quality and incompetent police work at like basic investigative level, and your prosecution doesn't have the capacity or the ability to successfully prosecute, you're still not going to win on that. I'm all for DNA evidence and how the police has actually managed the DNA database is nothing short of criminal. For those of you who don't know, the SAPS failed to pay the service provider who was administering their forensic evidence management system, of which their DNA database formed a part of. The result of that is there were about 6 million pieces of DNA evidence in limbo when I last checked around about August last year. That affected 240,000 criminal cases. The hazard there and the danger there was that backlog of evidence meant that all those cases, all 240,000 of them, and they were serious, they were rapes and murders and that sort of stuff, could have been thrown out of court for a lack of evidence, tying the perpetrator into it. So there was very little outcry at the time about it. I actually helped a very good organization, Action Society, of Ian Cameron's fame, do arrange a protest in front of Parliament about this issue, and we invited all the feminist organizations and all the high up feminists about who were all up on the whole men are trash hashtag and that sort of stuff. Not a single one of them pitched. Not a single one of them replied to the invite. None of them were at all interested in protesting, which I found fairly shocking, to be honest.
I see. Yeah, I can imagine. I see Morning Shot or Roman Kabanak is here in the chat tuning in, another friend of the show and also someone that Gideon also knows very well. Good evening, Roman. Nice to see you here. Hope you are enjoying the show so far.
Yeah, he's
Lane Graham
all the way from France, so
another
international
yeah, you're right.
guest.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, Lane Graham asks, are you familiar with or in contact with the Suidlanders? No, I'm not familiar or in contact with the circus. I'm sorry. I see Ken Watt asks. Ken Watt. Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
If South Africa had feds, they would all be running the Suidlanders. That is such a fed operation. It's not even funny.
Yeah, run by an ex-ANC guy, not fishy at all. You just saw the light one day. Ken asks, or not, he states, huge issue is the time it takes to get a legitimate firearm in, and I'm just putting it in quotation mark or in brackets, in South Africa, I'm assuming. Gideon, you've got a lot to comment on here, so you can have the floor of this one. It's a major issue.
Yeah, it is a major issue. I just first have to say, before anything else, hello to Mareike, who is an honorary and very active member of my shooting club, which is about 1,500 kilometers away from her, and she still flies in to come shoot with us. So Mareike, goeienaand, good to see you. Ken, so it does take a fair amount of time and effort to get the firearm license. I have written a how-to guide that just kind of guides newbies through it, because I can promise you one thing, it looks a lot more intimidating, and it is a lot more intimidating the first time around. Once you've got your first license, you kind of have gotten into the swing of things, and it becomes a lot less complex. Our major problem that we have with firearm licensing in SA is it's incredibly paperwork heavy, which, funny enough, contradicts the whole purpose of the Firearms Control Act of 2000 that was supposed to be all digital. I'll explain to you in a moment why it isn't. and that there is as a result of this massive paperwork burden, there is a huge degree of inefficiency and untransparency or intransparency, opaqueness, that's a better word, in how the stuff is processed, which doesn't help. But I can highly recommend starting the process. I can highly recommend taking it seriously because it is well worth it. And as someone that owns about 13 guns myself, it's doable. I'm no more special than anyone else watching this. If I can do it, you don't have to own 13. You can stop at 1 or 2, but I mean, you can do it, really.
I thought you were going to say you can stop at 10.
Well, you don't. You can go all the way
Yeah.
until your bank account or your spouse stops you, which at some point they will. But yeah.
I just want to answer a quick question here. Marika asked, why can't I make super chats? Well, for me, it's at the moment, I can read everyone's comments very easily in chat. It's not too crowded. So I'd rather use super chats in the future if my chat becomes too crowded and I can't really get to everyone's questions or everyone's comments. Then you can, I think that would be a nice way to make your super chat worth it. Because at the moment, firstly, I'm not in any financial hardship, and I don't really consider my channel worthy of like you throwing money at me. So I'd rather in the future, I'm reserving future chats, super chats for if the chat for practical reasons, if the chat's really difficult to follow for me, then I'll initiate them to make sure that people can actually get a bang for their buck there. But thank you very much. The sentiment is very much appreciated, Marika. Baie dankie. There was a comment here that I wanted to oh no, it was this one from Tank, who says, now that I have new employment and earning a decent salary, getting my license for self-defense is top priority. Excellent.
Good,
excellent,
man. Well, I'm assuming Tank's gender, so I apologize if I'm getting it wrong. But I assume it's good, man. But do feel free to correct me.
I see here. Dagbreaker says 10 guns because reloading is so time consuming.
Yeah, you get it.
Very good.
You get it.
Yeah. All right. So I wanted to touch on something that I mentioned earlier, but I think is I'd like to get some more thoughts from you on, and that is, I would pretty much call it an AstroTurf narrative of, let's say, just the commentariat in South Africa, pushing very hard for a gun debate, quote unquote, in South Africa, and with the implication that we need stricter gun regulation. Now that I don't know how that's possible, the next thing would probably be an outright ban of firearms. What has been your perception in this regard? You don't even have to mention small organizations that have like 15 members, but that get quoted in the media often. I don't even use their name. I don't think they deserve it. But
the wretched. No, we won't speak of the wretched.
But in regards to just this what I would call AstroTurf, an artificial push for gun regulation in South Africa, what's been your perception on this?
So there is a lot to say here, but the first one is I find it hilarious whenever they call for a gun debate, because whenever there is an actual debate where there's opposing voices with evidence and with arguments, they never pitch and they avoid it like the plague. So I would actually be quite chuffed if we could have a national sort of gun debate, but like an actual debate, not just talking sock puppets on a stage telling us what we should believe. The general public, by all in sort of indications, wouldn't go for more severe firearm restrictions anyway. A great example of this, I think, was about the 200,000, maybe 250,000 comments through DRSA on the proposed Firearms Control Act Amendment bill last year, where they tried kind of testing the waters if people would go for a self-defense ban or more restrictions on the number and types of firearms people could own. It was just outright rejected. I think 98% of those 200 and 250,000 comments would just flat out reject this proposal as a whole. What I found particularly interesting out of that process, a document came out which was commissioned by the Civilian Secretariat on Police in December 2014. And it was a study done by the Wits School of Governance looking at the 15-year period from the year 2000 up until the end 2014 as to what effect the FCAF 2000 actually had on crime, violent crime, so-called gun violence and murder and all that stuff. And it's 178 pages long. If anyone wants to read it, please get in touch with either Ernst or myself, and I'll gladly send it to you. It's a good read. It's a very good study. And it came to the conclusion that, firstly, there's no meaningful evidence at all that the FCAF 2000 had any impact on crime or violence at all. The study strongly recommended against further gun control legislation. And they used the phrase, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but that the authorities must, and I shit you not, they said this generally, shift their misplaced focus on further firearm restrictions and shift that focus back to policing. Because all the evidence shows that effective, strong policing with good policing operations, good working crime intelligence, all this sort of stuff is what had the major impact on bringing violence down, and that the gun law actually didn't matter at all. They also were quite forward thinking. If you think a study that was brought up beginning 2015, that they said with the advent and development of 3D printing, the Firearms Control Act of 2000 and all sorts of gun laws could become irrelevant anyway in the very near future. And we're pretty much on our way there already. So a study commissioned by the government itself recommended against more gun control. Of course, they buried it for 6 years. And it only came to light after several organizations did numerous prior requests to the CSP, the Civilian Secretariat, to get it. But so we've got the scientific evidence that gun control doesn't work. We've got decades of common sense and experience. We have the general public that just outright rejects it. Even guys like John Matham. At the time, I was on a radio interview with him on 702, which I cannot imagine a more hostile sort of work environment to talk about guns and gun laws. And even John Matham was horrified at it. And he was just like, this is a crazy idea. This shouldn't even be discussed in our country. And that was before the July riots. Since the July riots have happened, we've had Rebecca Davis, who once wrote a tweet that I saved. And I promise you, I'm going to blow it up and frame it and hang it on my wall as a reminder, in which she said she cannot work in the in the sort of anti-gun industry or lobby or whatever, because the white middle-aged men of the pro-gun lobby are just too infuriating. So Rebecca, I think, has blocked me on Twitter. She doesn't like me. She doesn't like most of us. Even she came out and wrote a piece after the July riots where she said, the government has proven that it can't protect us. And if it wasn't for guns in civilian hands, the country would have descended into chaos. I've also heard of similar sentiments. I have confirmed it, but I'm not going to say who it was. People, researchers working for an organization that is typically quite anti-gun in what they put out, have actually kind of said the July riots have changed their minds on the issue completely. Because their whole thing is they were pro-gun control because the government should protect us, and that is their role, and ordinary citizens shouldn't be doing this. And then the riots happened, and they're like, well, reality proved a different point. And I think all these things are valuable. Why the media is obsessed about it, I think we need to ask Sir Ramaphosa and the people funding him why Adrian Basson has this particular axe to grind, because I'm sure there's a little bit of a money trail. I don't know if there's mattress money that went from Fala Fala and somehow found itself to Media 24 se hoofkantoor, but yeah.
There's a comment here from Morning Shot who says, the problem with a national debate is that most people are illegally armed anyway. The license nonsense only affects the middle class who are not activists. Do you concur?
I agree 100%. So we have, depending upon whose estimates you read, the one was from the Small Arms Survey 2017, around about there, that it was between about 500,000 to nearly 6 million unlicensed firearms in circulation in South Africa. Now, if it's close to the 6 million mark, that means the number of unlicensed guns outnumber the number of licensed guns we actually have in this country, which means there's no chance in hell that all those firearms are in the hands of criminals committing crimes with them. They are in the hands of ordinary people who cannot afford to license guns and are so desperate to protect themselves and their families, they're willing to break the law own an unlicensed gun and either carry it or have it in a safe place so that they at least have something to defend themselves with. And I think that's an issue I've had a conversation with before, but for some reason the media just don't want to investigate it. They don't seem keen to actually go into a township and they say to people, what is the story? Because if 6 million criminals had guns, I think we'd know. It would be worse than it presently is, definitely.
Right. And Quentin here says the anti-firearm lobby are basically just outgunned. I see what you did there. If you can arm yourself, you're well on the way to becoming ungovernable. Yes, well, that's pretty much just a synonym for state-proof. And me and Gideon actually had a conversation specifically about how owning a firearm legally can help you become state-proof, and that's on my channel. You can just you can just search on YouTube state-proofing your life, Gideon Joubert, or state-proofing your life, Conscious Caracal, and you'll find that conversation where we specifically go into firearm ownership, how to get your license in South Africa, and how it helps you state-proof your life.
I would like to add
yes,
something
go
to
for it.
comment, because it's ironic that we are gun owners are a threat to a strong central tyrannical government. But if your central tyrannical government is highly dysfunctional and there's a complete sort of state of chaos that is the default sort of situation in the country because of rampant crime and all this nonsense and riots, then actually having a gun, by being ungovernable, actually creates a situation of order, peace, and safety. And that kind of, I get what you were saying, but in the South African context, our state is so failed, rather, not officially, but in my anecdotal opinion, that the gun owners are actually bringing stability, not chaos.
There's a question for you, Gideon, from Pete Buttons, who asks, what is the penalty for an unlicensed firearm? And I'm going to add to that in South Africa.
So the maximum that's prescribed by the FCA, the Firearms Control Act, is 15 years imprisonment, last time I checked. Obviously, what happens to guys that own unlicensed firearms and that commit crimes with them, there's a whole bunch of charges that end up getting heaped up. So it goes more than 15. I have actually heard of people that were caught with unlicensed firearms, but because they had no criminal intent with them, actually escaped with suspended sentences. So it depends. You might get away with 0 years behind bars, or you might leave with about 15 years behind bars. It's a bit of needless to say, it's a bit of a risk. Hence, I don't recommend it as something people do at all.
And globally, in regards to gun control in South Africa, where do we rank on the spectrum of strictness of gun control and gun legislation? I've got an idea based on what you've said here tonight and what you've shared with us, but to zero in a bit more there, how do we compare with the rest of the world?
We are pretty strict. I think amongst the strictest in the world. I'd say we're in the top 10, top 15% of strictest gun control legislation. European countries that are in theory less permissive than we are, because their entry requirements as to what you need to do to become a gun owner are high. But once you actually have your status as a gun owner in countries from Germany to France to Italy, you actually have almost zero restriction then of what you do. You can own pretty much as many guns as you want in most cases. You're not restricted to, like, you can own semi-auto rifles, you can own handguns, you can own a lot of stuff. The Europeans are very finicky about allowing you to carry guns for self-defense, but owning guns in most European countries, once you are a gun owner, way less of a hassle than here, which is why explains why they have more guns per 100 people than we do. So we are pretty damn strict.
And to add to that, there is definitely a gun debate, as you stated earlier, in South Africa. What it's about, I mean, we can dream, but the big debates in South Africa, the debates that matter, that really that you think are important, how do they compare to the country in the world that probably, I would almost say, patented the term gun debate, and that would be the USA. They might as well. How does the topics of debate regarding firearms in South Africa compare to what they're debating in America? I know it's an obvious chasm between the two, but a lot of people seem to still confuse the two debates and the topics of debate and the parameters of what's being discussed and what's on the table. Can you maybe shed some light on that?
So the US gun debate is almost worth its own full hour-long episode. And it's a very different debate to the South African one. And there's a lot of different dynamics and emotions behind it. I'm almost willing to say the South African gun debate, for the most part, is actually quite calm. We don't have a Second Amendment, as much as I hate not having it. The fortunate thing of this sounds perverse. The fortunate thing about not having it as an explicit constitutional right is we tend to not have debates around about assault weapon bans and putting stupid systems in place. We already have a stupid system in place. Our debate kind of now revolves around, okay, the stupid system's in place, it doesn't work, but we're kind of making it work for us. And there's a small segment of society that says the stupid system in place doesn't work, therefore we need to make the stupid system stupider. And we have kind of reached a place where the general public are just going, no, I don't even own guns and this makes no sense. And that's kind of in a weird way, a less hostile work environment to have. I would love to have a Second Amendment. I don't see it happening in SA in my lifetime, unless we have a whole bunch of provinces secede and in their own constitutions they write it in, which some of them might do. I think the Zulus have a better chance of writing that into their constitution than the Cape Townians have and into theirs. But that's a whole different kettle of fish altogether. But the US gun debate is instructive. I do try to keep tabs on it, but I try not to get sucked into it. I think you and I had that conversation over a beer. It's like, it's fascinating, it's highly educational and enlightening, but it's different.
But we've got our own issues here regarding firearms that we, I think, need to give priority to.
Absolutely. And I can't help them win theirs, but strange enough, they might be able to help me win mine. So,
yeah. So, but on that topic, in South Africa, what are the main areas of focus that are being debated in a genuine sense?
So I think what we're looking at the moment, and this is kind of where the media is failing at this. They keep pushing, oh, we have mass shootings, we have this, the guns, and then you have think tanks from all over the spectrum. I mean, AfriForum, the Institute of Race Relations, the Free Market Foundation, Sakeliga, literally more conservative, classical liberals, and even sort of very liberal organizations even coming out and saying this is a stupid idea. So I think what makes our dynamic interesting in SA is there's a general lack of trust in the government's ability and the organs of state to sort of, what's that wonderful thing that they do with a constitutional mandate, to not enforce, to Ernst, help me here.
I'm also not
well, in any event, that they're failing at applying their constitutional mandate. So one of the SAPS, it's several things that they have in a constitutional mandate, but one is to
exercising
to secure the citizens of the Republic and their property against violence. I mean, 2018 already, the National Commission, the then National Commissioner, said the SAPS is overstretched and it's impossible for them to fulfill their constitutional mandate. You have the same sort of situation with the National Prosecuting Authority. You have the same situation with pretty much everything in the country. So you're having people who were previously quite statist going, you know, we can only trust the government with guns. Then you see how many policemen are selling guns to gangsters. That saga, by the way, if you want a deep dive on that, buy Mark Shaw's book. The title is Give Us More Guns. And you'll get a glimpse onto the tip of the iceberg of just how sick and sore that is. And you have policemen confiscating guns off gangsters and selling those guns back onto the streets before even processing them through evidence. And it's a huge network and industry. So you have people seeing stuff like that and going, you know, perhaps it's time for us to actually investigate this individual resilience and this community resilience stuff. I mean, AfriForum was just absolutely nailed at every possible corner by journalists like Max de Pree and Adrian Basson. And then the last time I read something of Max, he was disingenuously kind of retracting what he said and changing his tune about AfriForum. But you see these guys that firmly believe that citizen organizations should take a step back and that they're hampering government from doing what they should do. And they've seen the fruits of that, which are pretty rotten. And now they're kind of coming to the party about 2 decades too late, going, okay, maybe we shouldn't be having all these strict controls and systems and laws that are just making business and life and self-defense almost impossible.
There was a comment here that I wanted to get to before we continue. I know it was a question for you from Gert Jansen van Rensburg, who asks, Gideon, how is the program of license the owner, register the gun going or not?
It is going, but it's a long process in the sense of it's going to take, if we are successful at it, probably a good couple of years. However, there are 2 positive points to this. The one is I've had some fairly enlightening conversations along these lines with people who are traditionally not friendly about guns and gun rights and gun owners, and they actually see the point of this, because it would actually be better than what we presently have. And the second point that drives into the first is the fact that the failure of administering the FCA and the potential collapse of the CFR as a whole means that the country could, if the present system is mismanaged badly enough, find itself in a situation where there's just no gun law or actual registry and existing at all. It's all collapsed. Obviously, the state's response to that would be, all guns are illegal, ban everything, but they don't know who has what, and it's impossible to track, which sounds fine for an anarchist like myself, until you realize that they're also going to use that ban to take firearm dealers and people selling ammunition out of business immediately. So it would be sort of like a statist's wet dream to try it for something like that, so they could try it. But the people who really, this is the funny part, the people who actually really believe in gun control don't want that to happen, because they understand the implications of it. So we may have success in this. Watch the space. Please don't put me on an egg timer on it, because you're going to be disappointed. But
yeah, don't mark your calendars.
But buy a few calendars, because I'm hoping to actually get somewhere with this.
I just want to thank Question Everything, who said, I'm heading out. I will be donating to Friends of AfriForum. Thank you very much. Stay strong, stay safe. I'm a witness to you and pray for you daily. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. On behalf of AfriForum, I'd also like to say thank you. Question here from Sean, who asks, what news stations, websites do you recommend for honest and accurate reporting? Well, reporting is difficult because that's a very, very rare skill. Just in regards to the news and analysis, I would say Politics Web is an absolutely fantastic platform. You should definitely check it out for everything South Africa. You will get no better hub of opinion pieces, analysis, essays, reports anywhere else than Politics Web, if South Africa is your focus. Other stations, I would say, look at the alternative media online. You can find some excellent analysis and reporting here. There are some excellent channels. Morning Shot, that was in the chat earlier, Roman Kabanak, is a great source of news if you want to get reporting specifically on the news in South Africa. Morning Shot channel, great channel for that. And then there's also channels like Joe Emilio, channels like Ronaldo Ghost. There's a lot of places where you can find good quality reporting on what's going on in South Africa. But my recommendation would be to consume a combination of all these channels and websites to give you a nice broad view of what's going on and different perspectives on what's going on. That will give you a nice clear picture. Gideon, do you have any recommendations on platforms that I haven't mentioned that people can check out for reliable reporting or news from South Africa?
So there's a few more to add. I don't know if they do anything in English, but Marula Media are actually like one of my favorite Afrikaans news sources. In fact, it is my favorite one in Afrikaans. Then in English, I highly recommend the Daily Friend. They're an outfit from the Institute of Race Relations. If you're looking for specific targeted stuff, the Center for Risk Analysis, CRA, actually has some good info. Very good info they put out. And then for more sort of generic stuff. Biz News is great. It's Alec publication. They've really grown quite a bit over the past 10 years into a massive thing. So between that, Politics Web, Morning Shot, the other guys, you actually can have a very balanced, quite broad exposure to news and media.
And then also want to add, definitely, I see it Afraid to Watch it, Chris Wyatt Africa, definitely another great channel to go subscribe to on YouTube that gives very nice broad coverage on South Africa, detailed coverage with a lot of knowledge as well. Chris is definitely excellent. And then also go check out Man Patria, the website, where you'll also get very nice news analysis from some bright South Africans. I see a lot of people saying here, Chris Wyatt, absolutely. So go check out his channel on YouTube as well for that. Now, something else that I wanted to, as we're winding down now closer to the end of the episode here, Gideon, is actually to get back to that topic we discussed the previous time you were on my channel, and that was state proofing your life. Maybe just condense. Before we continue, absolutely, Big Daddy Liberty as well, another great channel that does weekly news analysis in South Africa. Definitely go subscribe to his channel. Also, apologies again to anyone that I'm leaving out. I'm just remembering off the top of my head. If you like to get some news analysis in Afrikaans, dan kan jy ook na Politiek toe gaan op YouTube en gaan luister na ons daarso in ons Afrikaanse analise. But yeah, Gideon, as I was saying, when it comes to state-proofing your life through taking your safety into your own hands, could you maybe quickly summarize some of our thoughts from our previous conversation on that topic of how does owning a legal firearm contribute to state-proofing your life in South Africa?
So I can't remember exactly where we went with that, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to go around the same sort of core of it. So if you look at the firearm itself and firearm ownership, that is just like a single element to a well-developed defensive toolbox for the average person. And there's three parts to it. The one is, and the firearm is the final. That's the equipment part. So you've got mindset, which is your attitude pertaining your own right to life and the people you care about. And my best description of what it is that you must have what's called a combative mindset. That doesn't mean you need to go around aggressive. That's not it. A combative mindset purely means that when you are under duress, when you have failed at avoiding a situation where your life and the lives of the people you care about is under threat, and you cannot evade it, and you are forced to fight for your life, that you will do whatever it takes, regardless of how distasteful it is, to prevail, not survive, because you can still survive a fight and end up in a wheelchair ICU. That is not what your aim is mentally. Your mission is to be victorious and to prevail over your opponent and your circumstances, or over your aggressor and the circumstances. That you'll do whatever it takes to prevail. That is the mindset you need to cultivate, and that is a journey for a lot of people who aren't sort of used to that sort of thing. The second thing is to develop the skills, which comes through knowledge and training. So it involves a bit of study and involves quite a bit of physical work to become fitter, to become stronger, to learn how to fight with your chosen tools, whether it is a bottle of pepper spray or a baton or a knife or a firearm. And the third element is then to actually have the tools on your person and available when you need them. And that is, firearm is but one of them. So to be a resilient individual, when we're talking specifically about facing a aggressor or multiple aggressors, you need mindset, skills, and equipment. And mindset always leads, the training feeds into the skills, and the equipment then follows. What I've found from people that take their personal safety and security seriously is they take other aspects of life seriously as well. And they kind of become a community asset, because that's probably going to be the guy that knows basic life support, BLS, and how to do CPR. He's going to be the guy who knows how to stop an arterial bleed or a sucking chest wound or something like that. Have that equipment either on him or nearby. He or she is going to be the person that is defensively trained and has the right tools to protect themselves and other innocent people. They're inherently going to be more alert and aware, and they're going to see things that other people ignore or walk past. Therefore, they are an invaluable sort of early warning resource in any neighborhood watch or community that is concerned about its own safety. And the more people you have that adopt that sort of outlook on life that says, I refuse to be a passenger to my circumstances. I'm going to be an active participant in my own rescue. I'm going to be my own first responder. You create a single person as an island of resilience. And the more people in the community you have that are small islands of resilience, you start creating an island chain. And if enough of those island chains, you start creating the outlines of a continent. And you get resilient communities by starting with resilient individuals and then infecting more people to becoming those. And the great thing about this is you don't need to do it around a political line or a religious line or a cultural line. It's something that can be generally adopted because you're appealing to someone's self-interest in, I want to survive, I want to thrive, I want to be safe and keep my family safe. And unless you're a nihilist, chances are you've got a part of that in you. And
I don't want to be a victim.
You don't want to be a victim. Does that sound more or less right to you, Ernst?
Yeah, that's pretty much the elevator pitch for what we discussed. But you're going to have to go watch that previous episode if you didn't. And the episode's name is "Stay Proofing Your Life," and you can just search in YouTube "Stay Proofing Your Life," Conscious Caracal, or "Stay Proofing Your Life," Gideon Joubert. I see here. There was, I've lost the comment now, but there was a question that asked, how can they support your campaign to, oh, here we go. Ken asked, how can we support the Register the Owner campaign?
So, Ken, I think the best thing to do is please keep an eye on my publication. It's Paratus.info. It's P-A-R-A-T.
There's a link in the description.
Even better. Okay, links in the description. When things start developing there properly, I will keep everyone up to date. It has been developing for some time, but I have nothing exciting to tell you up until this point yet. And you're welcome to follow the links on there to my various socials. My Twitter is not a serious place. I just want to warn everybody who thinks
it's like Camelot.
Yeah, it's like Camelot.
It's a silly place.
It's a silly place, and it's almost impossible for me to be articulate with the character limit. So I always sound testy, short-tempered, rude, which I am, but not necessarily my intention when I'm tweeting. So yeah, just buyer beware, caveat emptor.
Yeah, so Gideon, the question I ask all my guests at the end is to give you the opportunity to leave the audience with a thought or a rhetorical question or anything. Just if you could plant something at the back of their mind for them to think about and chew on for the week ahead, or even the year ahead, what would you leave them with? So,
as somebody that's trained a fair number, and there are many instructors that have outtrained by exponential numbers the amount of people I've done. So I'm by no means an expert, but a fair number of people with their defensive tools. I would like to leave you with the realization that this is something that is firmly within the ability for ordinary peace-loving people to do. You do not need to be special or special forces or particularly strong or aggressive or clever or anything, or even with superior coordination to do these things. What is most important is that you cultivate the will and the desire to prevail and protect yourself and understand that your life is value. So anyone who goes away from this and says, hey, I want to get into protecting myself, defending myself, please do make contact. I'm happy to help people on the right path. I'm not someone who sells training. I will always refer you to the best person in your area or try and help you find them. But the thing is, I want people to go away and say, you know what, I can do this. I can protect myself and my family, and I want to protect my community as well. There are ways to get started in doing that. Be your own first responder, people. No one else is coming to save you. It's up to you to do it.
Perfect way to end the episode, Gideon. But before we say goodbye, I would just like to use the opportunity again to thank longtime sponsor of the show, Bitvice. And I'm very appreciative of their support of the content that I create. So Bitvice is the complete hedge against the global debasement of money, inflation, and government overreach. And Bitvice is a South African first Bitcoin only self-custody solution that helps individuals and entities buy and hold Bitcoin for the long term. Bitvice believes that everyone should hold their own Bitcoin and trust no one else. Recently, there have been a plethora of crypto custodians going bankrupt, taking their clients' Bitcoin with them. That is why Bitvice never holds your Bitcoin. They send it immediately to your own Bitcoin wallet where you hold the keys. Simply sign up to Bitvice if you live in South Africa, link your bank account securely, and buy Bitcoin in seconds, and they will help you with that. Visit their website, bitvice.io, or click the link in the description to begin your journey with Bitcoin. And you can also watch their podcast called By the Horns. You can find it on YouTube and every other podcast platform. Very interesting stuff. I always learn something new there. And then, Gideon, I'm going to give you the opportunity. There's already a bunch of links in the description, but where can people find you? Where do you want people to find you? You can, the floor's all yours.
So please find me at my publication, which is paratus.info. It's in the description. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. I also have a YouTube channel that I try to regularly stream and update, but life occasionally gets a bit in the way. So it's not my primary way of communicating with people. But if you want in and jump on any of those, please feel free. I appreciate everyone who joins and supports. So thank you in advance.
Yeah, well, Gideon, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your insights. This is a field that I know you're very passionate about and that you know a lot about, and that's why you're always one of my go-to contacts to have a chat about firearms in South Africa, specifically firearm ownership. And yeah, I'd also like to thank the chat. Your questions and comments tonight were, again, superb as always. Really appreciate it. And I'll check you on the next episode. If you're new on this channel, if it's the first time you're tuning in, you can subscribe if you like these types of conversations. And everyone, you can also leave a like if you enjoyed the comment, the content here tonight. Also, I appreciate everyone that commented live, but if you are watching and it's not live anymore, you can still take part in the conversation. You can leave your comments in the comments section, and I will respond to as many as possible. I read all of them, and I'm really appreciative of your feedback. So, guys, I hope you have an excellent rest of the evening if you live in South Africa, rest of the day if you live somewhere else in the world. There's probably some other countries tuning in, also coming to the end of their day. Some of your days might just be starting now, lucky you. So I hope you guys have an excellent rest of the day, and I will see you on the next episode next week when I chat to Koketso Rezane about the social compass and where your values should come from, what role models to choose, and the paradigm and a way of thinking outside the model of party politics. So I'll check you there next week. Gideon, once again, thank you very much for your time. Ek hoop jy het 'n baie lekker aand, and I'll check you again when I see you, hopefully in person.
100% sien uit daarna.